Have you been hitting walls with your mixing or just been scratching your head at the process? Well, in this video, I'm gonna go over my top 10 mixing tips that I wish I knew earlier. So let's jump in. Hey, yo, it's Alex from Metamind Music. And as always with this channel, it's my mission to help you, the artist, the producer, the musician, produce themselves by developing their mindset, expanding their creativity, and connecting to their inner artist in a deeper way. And in this video, I wanna go over the tips that have helped me the most along my mixing journey to help you actually move the needle forward and get closer to that pro sound with your mixes. So let's dive in. All right, number one is get it right at the source. All right, this is all about source sound. This is all about recording, miking techniques, getting it sounding good up front. I can't emphasize this enough because if you're mixing and recording the same track, how much time you put up front for capturing good performances, good tones, miking technique is going to be 80% of the work versus the processing the tracks, the automation, all that kind of stuff is more so like 20% of the work. The core foundation of the work is in getting good source tones, right? So properly tuned instruments, properly placed microphones, having a good sounding room, doing sound design, selecting the right samples will have the most impact on your mix over anything else. And keep in mind that if you're getting ready to mix a track and you're noticing that the source sound is just not cutting it, it's worth going back and re-recording or changing up the sound or doing some more sound design up front rather than trying to fix it in a mix later. It'll just save you so much trouble and get you to that pro sound a lot quicker. All right, tip number two is to listen to your mix in mono. And this might feel super counterintuitive, especially if you've just finished tweaking and fine-tuning a nice stereo image to collapse it back to mono. You might be asking yourself why. And the whole reason for this is that when you collapse things in mono, you get a way better representation of what frequencies are masking and what frequencies are working well together in an environment where a lot of people will be listening to your music, right? So whether it's on their laptop speakers, their phones, there will be people who listen to your mix in mono. And when you collapse your mix to mono, if certain sounds just disappear because of phase cancellation, or if there's some crazy masking going on for the vocals, for the melody, for your low end, if that's happening when you collapse your mix to mono, it's going to be a huge problem. And it's also a super useful tool to identify the problem frequencies if you're having trouble EQing your tracks. So again, listen to your mix in mono regularly as you're going through your mix. And generally, if it sounds good in mono, it's going to sound fantastic in stereo. All right, tip number three is doubling or layering your tracks in the mix. So this could be like taking a track, making a duplicate, and then processing that duplicate completely differently than the original. You might saturate it, you might compress it like crazy, trick it out, and then mix it at a lower volume along with the original. And doing tricks like this can be a game changer if you're really having trouble sculpting the sound into a particular direction. Let's say you're trying to EQ a synth track and you want to get some more grittiness, but anytime you add saturation, anytime you add distortion, it kind of just bleeds the tone. It kind of just doesn't sound right. Well, you could actually just make a duplicate and then process that duplicate and mix it into the original, leaving the original intact. And doing these kind of moves are just a game changer when it comes to mixing. Another thing you could do is layer sounds that are not duplicates of the original. So you could be adding stuff such as pink noise, white noise. You could add extra samples, extra pad layers on top of an existing layer, maybe playing the same melody, matching the same rhythm to just enhance and beef up the sound that you're trying to enhance with an extra layer. All right, so always keep that in mind while you're mixing. If you're having trouble getting the sound you want from the original track with processing techniques, then consider duplicating it and layering in that duplicate with the processing on and trying to get to your sound that way. All right, tip number four is something that's thrown around a lot, and that's always listen to your ears. And I do agree with this advice with one caveat, and this is that you actually understand the tools and you know what to listen for while you're listening. All right, if you don't understand how EQ or compression works or how to hear different frequencies or different forms of compression, then maybe using your ears might not be the best idea to start out. However, if you're at that point, then I encourage you to use your ears over always referencing what the graph looks like. Because with a lot of the plugins that we use, we see all of these amazing graphs to represent different frequencies, different compression ratios, etc. And what this actually leads us to do is to make more decisions based on visual feedback versus sonic feedback, right? Audio feedback. And what are we actually working on is sound, right? And at the end of the day, nobody cares. No listener cares what you did with your EQ, what processing trick you did, what compressor you used, what your vocal chain is. Like, nobody cares in the general population. All they care about is if the song sounds good and if it has an impact on them. All right, so regardless how extreme or how weird or how odd a plugin setting might look, always use your ears. If it sounds good to you, if it sounds banging, then keep going with it. And don't rely too much on your eyes if something looks weird or if it looks abnormal to what you're used to or what someone else is doing. I would kind of push that to the side and go along with your ear and what you think sounds good. All right, tip number 5 is automation is your friend. And automation is a super powerful tool that can actually breathe life into a mix. It can really take it to the next level by emphasizing certain things and really creating dynamics between parts, creating that tension and release, that contrast, right? It's really unreal how much a little bit of automation can go to really enhance a mix. And the added benefit is that you can actually direct the listener's attention and what they're focusing on at different parts of the song by automating a mix. Maybe during the verse, the melody has to be a little bit louder, and maybe during the chorus, it's all about the bass and drums and the vocals, right? So whatever it may be, you can actually use automation to accentuate the specific things in the song that are relevant at that point in the song. And keep in mind, in today's day and age, practically everything can be automated. So get creative. This is a great way to discover unique sounds and have your own sound, your own way of doing things when it comes to mixing, is to really get unique with your automations. All right, number 6 is leaving humanity in your tracks, right? So before you jump into trying to perfect everything by lining everything up on the grid, making everything pitch perfect, right? Take a second and step back and listen to the music, listen to the performance, and decide from there. So don't be so hooked on getting every note perfect that you lose out on the feel of a song and performance. Sometimes being ahead or behind the grid can actually yield the best grooves, right? It kind of has that natural feel, that natural push and pull to it, which you cannot achieve if everything's perfectly on the grid. All right, so before you go ahead and auto-tune all your vocals and line everything up to the grid, take a step back and listen that if the thing you're editing is not the thing that gives the song character and gives the song a feel. And a lot of music today is missing that character, right? It almost feels robotic when everything is so perfect. And this, of course, depends on the genre, it depends on the vibe you're going for. However, you want to try and keep a little bit of humanity, a little bit of character, a little bit of style, instead of trying to perfect everything all the time. So definitely consider that as you're mixing. All right, tip number 7 is use the solo button sparingly. All right, so this is when you solo a track and you're EQing it, you're compressing it, you're adding reverb, and you're making it sound amazing by itself. And this is a big problem because something can sound amazing by itself. However, once you throw it in the mix with everything else, once you introduce the bass, the drums, all of these different frequency areas going on, it will completely change the context of what you were working on. So again, without the context of the whole mix, don't focus on trying to get something sounding amazing by itself, because once you throw back in all the other elements, the relationship will change. Like examples of this is like adding too much reverb to a track. It's very easy when it's in solo because it sounds amazing. Add reverb on anything, it sounds better. However, in the mix, if you're adding reverb to every track individually and then you add it together, it's just gonna get smeared and turn into this like hazy mess. All right, so keep in mind that sometimes in solo, something won't sound amazing by itself. It might not sound great. However, once you throw it in context of the whole mix, poof, it just sounds amazing, like magic. So don't rely too much on how things sound like in solo. All right, tip number 8 is phasing and stereo imaging. And this is really apparent once you start whipping out your stereo widening plugins, or if you have presets or patches that have this crazy wide stereo field, or if you're using multiple microphones on one sound source, then paying special attention to phasing becomes extremely important. And the reason behind this, all right, so let me illustrate this with my hands. So if you have a stereo sound coming out of 2 speakers and hitting your ears at the same time, if the waveforms are working together, they're going to add together into making this awesome thing that you've sculpted. However, if they're working in opposites, okay, if they're out of phase, then when you combine them together, they're going to nullify each other. And a great way to test this is to, again, collapse your mix into mono and listen to your stereo sounds, listen to your super wide sounds. And if the volume ducks down when you collapse in mono, that's a huge sign that that sound is out of phase, that your stereo imaging is out of phase. So you're gonna have to tweak it with a utility plugin or whatever it may be. But you just wanna check these things, especially with drums, overheads, super wide stereo images, crazy delays, whatever it may be. Make sure that your stereo image is in phase. Otherwise, when you collapse it to mono, you're going to lose out volume. And if you don't check that and you finish your mix, then when somebody listens to your mix in mono, it's going to be totally out of whack from what you intended. All right, tip number 9 is to pay special attention to the low end of a mix. And this actually took me quite a while to learn, but I started to learn that the mids, the low mids, even the mids are probably the most important part to get right in a mix, because it's so easy for the low end of a mix to become muddy, to become unclear, become smeared, and to lack clarity and lack power. And if you can really balance the low end of your bass sounds, your kick drum, even some synths can really get into the low end, even the low end of your vocals a little bit. If you can really balance those elements and sculpt out specific frequency ranges for them each to live within, then you're going to be able to have a low end that is pulsing, that is powerful, and then everything else is going to fall into place a lot easier. Because if you're lacking that low end clarity, it's going to be really hard to make anything in the mids and the high mids sound powerful, because that low end is lacking. That low end power is so crucial to getting a mix to pop and to really have impact. All right. And also, while you're mixing your low end, pay special attention to giving yourself a little bit of headroom, because low end frequencies take up a lot more headroom than high-end frequencies, right? They take up more space. So you want to pay special attention to, when you're sculpting those low-end frequencies, that you actually leave enough space for all of the higher stuff, like the higher frequencies, the high mids, so that your mix sounds balanced. Because if your low end is taking up too much room, you're going to clip on your master, and then you're going to make moves adjusting your mids and like trying to sculpt out frequencies of your high-end instruments, when you can just create more headroom in the low end. All right, and tip number 10 is to export your mix with some headroom. So whether you're planning on mastering your own song, or if you're sending it out to a mastering engineer, you want to make sure that you give some headroom so that you have some room to play with in the mastering phase. Because if you export your mix all the way maxed, almost at 0, then there's almost nothing that a mastering engineer can do. Like in the mastering phase, you're pretty much like, well, this is pretty much the max that it can go, and you can maybe do a few things. But if you give yourself a little bit of room, then you're going to have a little bit more flexibility and freedom to really just have another phase of quality control, but also enhance the mix from a different perspective, right? From the mastering perspective, and allow that last little bit to be made up from the mastering. So what I like to aim for is anywhere from -6 to -4 dB. Then you have a good amount of space to work with, and you can easily make that up with a limiter or any other kind of mastering plugin. And hey, if you're just getting started with music production and feeling completely overwhelmed by the process, or if you've been at this for a while but you're having trouble finishing projects, or hey, if you just want to get a glimpse inside my personal workflow, I've created a super easy to follow 7-step framework that helps you go from your very first ideas to picking the best ones, arranging a song, editing it, mixing, mastering, and getting that song complete, so you can start to get better and better at all those skills by taking action. And it's super handy to have around the studio as a printout to follow along with. So if you're interested in grabbing that, you can grab it in the description below. All right, and that wraps it up for this video. I just wanted to do like a quick rapid fire top mixing tips that I really think are valuable to help you get better mixes, but I would love to hear from you in the comments down below. What are your top mixing tips or techniques? So what have you discovered on your journey that has been a game changer for you, or that's really helped you discover your sound as a mixing engineer? I'd really love to have a conversation down below. And if you have any other questions about mixing, don't hesitate to leave a question down below. I'm always happy to answer. And with that, I will see you in the next video.